defeating the Persians. Word of the outcome is anxiously awaited at Athens, 26 miles away. But there is only one way of sending the, and not an hour later is the message received. 23 centuries wrought vast changes in the civilized world, from the Greek Empire to the Roman Empire, the Muslim world, the medieval age, the Renaissance, and then the exploration of the Western Hemisphere and the rapid growth of its first great democracy. And now it is 1828 A.D. Andrew Jackson has just been elected President of the United States. A courier sets out from Washington to convey the important news to Jackson at his home in Tennessee. Not until nearly a month later is the message delivered. After 23 centuries, the speed of communication still depended largely upon the speed of transportation. All through these centuries, as bearers of news had toiled across mountains, had traversed vast open plains, had threaded their way through deep forests, or had tossed upon the broad expanse of ocean, they had many times encountered storms. They had seen the lightning in the skies, but they could not know there was one form of energy which was to shatter barriers to human contact, which was to revolutionize man's methods of communication. By the late 1700s, Volta in Italy had made a discovery that was to be of extreme importance. He had developed the principles of the electric battery, making possible a continuous flow of electricity moving with the speed of light. As a second important development, Watson in England demonstrated that electric current could be flashed through a wire, the earth being used to complete the circuit. Henry in America improved an earlier electromagnet, creating a device whereby even a feeble current could produce considerable attracting power. And then Morse, another American, brought these three together: electric battery, transmission wire with ground connection, and electromagnet, in the attempt to perfect the rapid means of communication. The pressing of a key at one end started a flow of electricity through the wire, causing an impulse to flash to an electromagnet at the receiving end, which brought two metal pieces together, producing a click. This was the world's first telegraph. In 1844, over an experimental line between Baltimore and Washington, D.C., flashed the world's first public telegraph message. Here was a system of virtually instantaneous communication, the telegraph, a development of world-shattering importance. Telegraph wires eventually brought together widely separated cities and towns, but the ocean was still a barrier. Rapid communication stopped at the shore. Then in 1866, a submarine cable containing many telegraph wires was successfully laid between North America and Europe. Messages which formerly had required weeks, even months for transmission by boat, could now be sent in a few seconds. Already, a revolution in man's methods of communication had taken place, but still messages could be conveyed only through the medium of code signals. And then in 1876, Alexander Graham Bell demonstrated that waves set up in the air by the vocal cords could be recreated at a distance. First, these waves caused a thin diaphragm to vibrate, varying the pressure upon a mass of carbon particles next to it. This, in turn, caused the electric current passing through a wire to increase and decrease. And these electrical variations, arriving at the electromagnet of the receiver, caused corresponding vibrations of another thin diaphragm there, setting up sound waves in the receiver identical with those set up by the voice in the transmitter. This was the telephone. While the wires that continued to carry code messages retained a very important function, now there were added wires which carried the personality of the human voice, another tremendous advance. Both telegraph and telephone required connection by wires, but inventive minds were still eagerly at work. In Europe, Marconi used the discoveries of a host of other scientists and inventors, and in 1896 brought out the first practical system of electrical communication without wires. Basic to this development was the discovery that electromagnetic waves, also traveling with the speed of light, could be set up in space and could be picked up at a distance by a receiving apparatus. Marconi's message of 1896 traveled less than 2 miles. But in 1903, wireless telegraph messages were flashed across the Atlantic. As invention upon invention piled up in the field of electrical transmission, Lee DeForest brought out a vacuum tube device which, with later improvements, controlled electromagnetic waves so that speech and music could be sent and received through space. Soon the wireless telephone, the radio, arrived, most marvelous of all communication devices.
This evening, we have the pleasure of hearing a distinguished company.
Only a century ago, man's methods of communication had changed little from what they had been for thousands of years. And then in 1844, the first telegram over 40 miles of wire. Today, a vast system of land communication throughout the world. In 1866, the first successful transoceanic cable. Today, a submarine network spanning the world's widest seas. In 1876, the world's first telephone message between Cambridge and Boston.
I can hardly hear you.
From this device, there developed a system of staggering size and complexity.
Hello, New Orleans, Chicago calling.
In 1896, the first successful wireless, forerunner of wireless stations which today are scattered widely over land and sea. In 1920, America's first commercial radio, forerunner of powerful stations which now dot the earth. Thus, the pioneers in the development of electrical communication, toiling through the past century, have given to the world a nerve system whose messages travel with the speed of light. To the average citizen today, the remotest part of the continent is only as far away as the nearest telephone or telegraph. Every business in our complex industrial structure carries on a large part of its activities by the telegraph, now so highly developed that many messages may flash simultaneously along each wire in opposite directions. Every business depends even more upon the telephone. Local city messages, inter-office discussions, conferences with branches or associated organizations and individuals, wherever they may be. How significant is this means of lightning-like communication to the homes of a nation, tying each with the entire country and the entire country with each? And with the advent of radio waves, neither telegraph nor telephone message need stop at the expanse of ocean. Unmeasured as yet is the full effect upon our world of its being blanketed by radio. By radio, daily market reports to the housewife,
fresh vegetables,
weather warnings broadcast to those in agriculture,
No definite
news gathered from the wide world almost instantaneously given back to the whole
The
world.
farm block is understood to be opposed to the measure.
Through the radio, the world's best entertainment available to listeners anywhere. Radio control of the ships that fly above the clouds. Radio to bring aid to other ships buffeted by stormy seas. To disseminate important public information quickly to all the people throughout a nation. These marvelous electrical devices of the past century have harnessed the world's fastest moving messengers and are, to an ever-increasing extent, breaking down ignorance and isolation and transforming the pace of the world in thought and in action from the sluggish plod of feet to the speed of light.